We are now reading directly from the cloud database that we have inside of the mobile service, at least from the history page. We have replaced the functionality that we had about reading from the SQLite local database, and we are now reading from the post table that is called the same way that in SQLite, but now from the mobile service itself. What we do have to do is have the same functionality on both the map page and the profile page. So I can copy this functionality that is reading from the post table inside of the mobile service and paste it so we can use it inside of the map page as well. In the map page, we currently have this using statement for us to read from the table. What we want to do is again comment this code and below it add the correct functionality, which is now going to be creating a new variable that is going to call the same way as before, but now we're going to get the information from the database that we have in the cloud. And we have to still call the display in map method that we had before. And the same thing in the profile page, where we are currently reading from the local database and where we now want to read from the post table in the mobile service. Now in this case, I do need to make this method async, and I'm only going to be commenting out the lines where we are defining a using statement and the block of code for that using, so the rest remains the same. We are only changing the source for the information, which is now going to be the table that we have in the cloud instead of the local database. And now what is left to do is test this out on the simulators. But in this lecture, now that we have this functionality ready, we're going to take a look at the greatest advantage of doing this in the cloud, which is having the same information no matter on what device. So I am going to run this on both simulators. I can't do it at the same time on both, but notice that when we run the application, it remains installed on the emulator. So I am going to run this on both, and then I am going to launch directly from the app that is being installed. So right now it's being launched on iOS, which means that on iOS, this latest version of the application with the lines of code that we have just changed is now installed on the device. So I can head back to Visual Studio and stop the execution. And then do the same thing for Android. I am going to run on the Android emulator, and once it runs, I'll be sure that the application is now installed in this emulator as well. So now that it is running, I know that it is also installed, so I can stop the execution and open both emulators. And notice that there is the application installed, so I can open it on iOS, I can open it on Android, and I am going to log in with the same user on both. So here I have the credentials ready on both, and I am going to log in on both devices. And notice that we do see the same information, but the best thing about it is that we can go and add new elements from each of the emulators. By the way, I first have to set the location on both emulators. So I see the list of elements, and I am going to add different experiences from each emulator. So here I have two experiences ready to be saved. I am going to click Save on Android, it was successful. Going to click Save on iOS, and it was also successful. And I am going to head back and notice that we now see both of the elements, both the one that we added from Android and the one that we added from iOS. And if we navigate to the map on both Android and iOS, are of course going to display the same information, and so are the profile pages in both emulators. So during this section, we have learned to implement mobile services, cloud services inside of our applications. We now have a cloud-based database that is now shared across all of the devices because now all of the information is in the cloud, so it's accessible from any device. We have used cloud services to save user information and retrieve that information to evaluate if the user should log in or not. Now in the next section, we're going to learn about the MVVM pattern, which will allow us to divide in a much more efficient and better way the logic for our application, the model for our application, and the interface or the view for our application.